This is just the beginning.
Well, hello and welcome to our live stream audiences from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and of course the Axios website. I'm Alexi McCammond, a national political reporter for Axios, coming to you live from Martha's Vineyard. Welcome to our series, the Pandemic Pivot, Small Business Recovery, which is a 6-part series. Last week, we heard from leaders in Wisconsin, and today we're virtually headed to the West Coast, along with all of you, to hear from policymakers and small business leaders in California. Today's show will consist of 3 one-on-one interviews, again, all from folks in California who are on the front lines of dealing with this in the coronavirus pandemic. I'll also be joined by my colleague, Dion Rabowen, Axios Markets editor. Thank you, of course, to our partner, Facebook, for this event. Please follow along using the hashtag Axios events and tag Axios at Axios on Twitter. For the latest news, follow our dashboard on the Axios website, axios.com. Yesterday, I was joined by Mayor Michael Tubbs of Stockton, California. We had a conversation about what the landscape is looking like for small businesses in his area. Let's take a listen to what he had to tell me. Well, now I'm thrilled to be joined by Mayor Michael Tubbs of Stockton, California. Mayor, thank you for spending some time with Axios today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are the youngest mayor of Stockton, and you're also the city's first Black mayor. And of course, you're now serving at a time when the coronavirus pandemic is ravaging the country and having a disproportionate effect on Black and Brown communities. So I'd love to start with just knowing, how does it feel to be you in this moment?
Well, thank you for the question. I think, as always, it's an honor to serve, particularly in my hometown. But let's make no mistake about it. These are perilous times. You have a COVID-19 global health pandemic, which is the worst we've seen in a century. And the federal response from the president and his administration that's been absent or not a response at all. And you couple that with sort of protests in the streets about structural violence and the violence of racism. And as a 29-year-old and the first Black mayor, it's definitely been challenging. And I think in this moment, a lot of the time and effort has been spent on reminding the city of Stockton what our values are and how all lives can't matter until Black lives do. And about the need to push and fight for a community with opportunity for everyone, and also understanding that the disproportionality of the impacts of COVID-19 aren't by accident. It isn't because Black people and Native people and Latinx people are inherently unhealthier or aren't taking this seriously, but it's because of, again, the structural racism that people are protesting against. So it's been a trial by fire. I think that I've grown so much as a leader and as a communicator, but I also feel very lucky to have agency in this moment and have the ability to put some of the values and some of the things I believe into practice as we seek to create a new normal in the city.
You know, the coronavirus pandemic has had an extreme effect on small businesses around the country. But of course, that's no different in Stockton, too. Last month in June, you took a listening tour of various small businesses in your area. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned about how the pandemic is affecting their ability to work?
Yeah, what I've heard from our small businesses was just a desire for clarity from the federal government, the county government, public health officer, and the city council about just how serious this is. There's so much misinformation. There's so much confusion around, the importance of wearing masks. But I think now we've reached a consensus as a country where we all need to be wearing masks. So there was questions about that. There was questions around sort of what can they do to make sure they're keeping their employees and their customers, their employees and their customers safe. They also wanted to thank the city for with limited what we were providing in terms of $3,000 emergency grants, not loans to small businesses. But it was really interesting to hear on the ground level how they were thinking about sort of the safety of their employees, the modifications they can make. And all they needed was clarity of information from government about how serious is this and what are the rules, what do they have to do, and they would be ready to comply. So I walked away understanding that our small businesses are being hit hard, but they also aren't willing to sacrifice lives of themselves and their employees for their livelihoods, but are looking for a clear, common sense, data-backed way to operate safely if possible.
And once they get that guidance or the ideas on how to move forward, of course, we all need money to make those things happen. And I know that Stockton is set to receive something like $27 million from the CARES Act to help in COVID-19 relief support. But can you tell me a little bit about if that's enough money and what that means for how you can help small businesses recover?
It's a lot more than $0, but it's definitely not enough money, just given the need, the staggering numbers of unemployment, and the understanding that this pandemic won't be over in a month or 3 months or in 5 months when the money has to be spent, that the impacts and some of the modifications will have to be in place until there's a vaccine, which could be as early or as late as the end of next year. So with the $27 million, we're going to continue providing small business support in the form of grants, again, not loans. We're going to beef up technical assistance so our small businesses, particularly our minority-owned businesses, who we know 95% of whom weren't able to qualify for the federal PPP loans, and ensuring that they understand the loans they qualify for locally and giving them the TA and assistance needed to qualify for some other loans. And also direct assistance to the folks who make businesses and cities work, people, the customers, the employees, et cetera. So we're looking at doing rental assistance. We're looking at doing mortgage assistance. We're looking at doing direct income assistance, understanding that, again, this pandemic is something unprecedented. We're walking into a Great Depression, and we have to do everything we can to make sure folks are able to provide for themselves and their families. But more will always be better, because you would want support to be ongoing for at least as long as the pandemic. But I know for my residents, even one-time support or some emergency funding they can apply to is definitely appreciated.
And you've actually been doing some fundraising of your own, right?
Yeah, so we as soon as the pandemic hit, it's before there was any indication that the city would be receiving CARES Act dollars. I also want to just thank the governor for doing that, because the city at first didn't get an allocation. It went to our county. But after meeting with the governor and his team, they decided to give some to cities of 300,000 or more, and I just want to thank them for their leadership on that. But in the absence of money, I had to hustle. So we started a Stockton fund where we've raised over $2 million to support small businesses, to support nonprofits, to support kind of collective impact efforts, and just making sure that we're providing for those we know were already in a pandemic before COVID-19. So making sure our seniors and elders had food, making sure our food deserts had access to fresh produce and food, making sure our shelters and food banks had the money for supplies, but also to scale up into add capacity, and making sure we're able to support our small businesses with emergency grants so that they're able to pay their commercial leases, or they're able to pay their big payroll. They were able to just have enough so they don't have to close and shut doors.
It's a point well taken that this is going to take a long time for businesses to recover and the country to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. But in your experience so far, what are one or two things that have been working for some small businesses in your area who are trying to move past the damage that's been caused because of this pandemic?
One thing that's been working for both our small businesses and the residents has been sort of the direct cash assistance. So whether it's an emergency grant to small business owners that allow them, the agency, to make the decisions necessary for their business, or whether it's been kind of unemployment insurance for those who are unable to work because of COVID-19, or whether it was the $1,200 in federal stimulus checks given one time, all those seem to be enough to kind of not end the pain, but to dull the pain and to allow people to persist and live and make decisions to get them through a month or 2 months. So I would encourage all government actors, federal government, et cetera, that we have to have something that's ongoing, that lasts as long as the pandemic lasts, and that provides folks the agency to make the decisions about what needs to be paid for for their families during this time.
And I know that you've been a proponent of universal basic income before all of this. So I'm curious if this moment in time has made you feel like there's more of momentum behind a push for UBI and something we could see implemented at the federal level.
100%. I think when you look at sort of COVID-19 and this being a once in a century pandemic, but also understanding that we live in a time of pandemic. So next year, maybe an earthquake, maybe a hurricane, et cetera, and that we're seeing folks seriously talking about the need to provide cash as a way to build resilience. I think you couple that with some of the unrest we've seen in the streets around not just police violence, but the violence of poverty, structural violence, and also understanding that 50 years ago in the same backdrop, Dr. King talked about a guaranteed income and said, after looking at all the civil unrest in the country, that abolishing poverty was one way to kind of bring peace and justice to communities. And I think there's bills right now from Senator Sanders and Senator Harris around direct cash assistance as long as the pandemic. I just started a group called the Mayors for Guaranteed Income, which has now up to 20 mayors throughout the country who are saying it's time for guaranteed income and they're willing to try it in their cities. So I think there's a lot of momentum because the times we're in are unprecedented and we have to have a bold response. And the last thing I'll say on this is that in researching, the last time we had a Great Depression, we responded with the New Deal. And part of that was Social Security, and part of that was unemployment insurance, and that was 1935. We can't fight 2020 pandemics with 1935 social safety nets. We have to add to our existing social safety net. We wouldn't use a 1935 computer because it didn't exist. We wouldn't use a 1935 car, and we shouldn't use a 1935 framework as the totality of our response to a 2020 pandemic. So guaranteed income has to be part of the discussion.
Mayor Michael Tubbs, I appreciate you spending some time with us today. Of course, wish we had more time to discuss all these things, but it's good to see you today.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to Facebook for making this event possible. Now, a message from our sponsor, Facebook. Well, our next guest is the founder of Cupcake and Bake Shop, Lila Owens, joining us from Berkeley, California.
Hi, Alexi.
Hi, Lila. How are you? It's good to see you.
I'm doing well, all things considered.
Yeah. Well, I'm so delighted to get to talk to you, Lila. I know that this is an important conversation for you personally and professionally, and for a lot of folks around the country. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lila, but you started Cupcake and Bake Shop technically in 2007, right? And then launched your store in 2014?
Correct.
So what's fascinating to me is that starting in 2007 was right before the economic crisis of 2008, 2009. Given that, and given what we're seeing now with the coronavirus, is now the most challenging time you've experienced as a small business owner?
That's a great question. I think because I was actually starting out in 2007 and it was toward the end of that recession, this is definitely a different experience. We established ourselves over the past, 4 or 5 years and had consistent sales. And the instant shelter in place was implemented, we saw our first nosedive in sales by like 35%. So that was the first time we had experienced something like that. So it was a little bit different than coming in and there's already a recession versus being in business and then a recession hits. Mm-hmm. So it felt a little...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying it felt a little different.
I would imagine. And I what I'm curious to know from you, Lila, is what's maybe the biggest challenge that Cupcake and Bake Shop has faced in light of the coronavirus pandemic?
So we definitely are a walk-in business. We also do have catering contracts. So we do weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, and obviously a lot of those events were impacted, canceled, postponed because of COVID. And so the first thing that we saw, huge decline in walk-in sales. And then a lot of people were canceling their events. Weddings were being canceled, corporate events were being canceled. And so people wanted refunds. So not only did we have a decrease in the money coming in, but the money we had already collected, we had to return. So that was the biggest issue initially, is that our revenue was just completely impacted. I had staff that were afraid to come to work because, everything was unknown about the virus. And so I didn't even have to furlough people. We had people that were volunteering to stay home. And so just everything was new and unprecedented. And so we were just trying to navigate the decrease in revenue, the, fewer work hours, fewer staff, and it was a challenge.
If there's one thing I know to be true about small business owners, it's that you guys are very nimble and entrepreneurial, of course, in spirit. What's interesting is hearing how you said that your business is primarily a walk-in business, also a business that relies on catering. But of course, as you outlined, a lot of those things are kind of going away during this pandemic. I know, like I said, because you're nimble, I'm sure that you've made some adjustments. Can you talk to me a little bit about what transition you've made to maybe having a greater digital presence, or how digital tools have kind of helped you in the process to recover from the pandemic?
Sure, that's a great question. So when we realized people were staying home, as mandated by law, we instantly implemented a same-day delivery service, which we had never done in the history of our business. And so we used Instagram and Facebook as a tool for that, to market what cities would be in the next day. You could place your order by DMing us on Instagram. So we made it convenient for people. And we got a huge response from that. It almost offset the lack of walk-in traffic we were getting by the response that we were getting from delivery requests. And so it was a little counterintuitive to spend, money on ads and things when revenue's down. But I decided that would be our best approach, was to get the cupcakes to the people, since the people could, were a little reluctant to come to us. So with that, we were able to actually create 2 jobs. I hired 2 delivery drivers, and they were driving all around town delivering these cupcakes to people. Because you have to think about it, even in a pandemic, you still have a birthday, you still have an anniversary, you're still celebrating life's events. And the fact that you have to do it at home now, it's almost like you want something celebratory just to remind you of life's normalcy. So we were getting, requests for kids' cupcakes and anniversary cakes. And so we responded to that by delivering.
Did we?
Can you hear me okay? Alexi, can you hear me?
Great.
I can hear you.
Well, after another quick video from Facebook, let's stay tuned. Let's watch this video from Facebook.
People everywhere should have an equal chance to connect with what matters, to share a new idea, to start or grow a business. It doesn't matter who they are, where they live, or what they believe. The way we see it, opportunity is for everyone. The chance to create a movement, to find or build a community, or to learn something new. This belief is why we look to help people boost their possibilities with skills that will help them succeed in a world that's busy changing every day. Tools designed to help keep their businesses humming and their communities strong. And knowledge that will help them put the best face on their business or idea. After all, we believe in supporting people everywhere who have the ambition to turn ideas into something bigger, better and greater.
All right, welcome. I am Dion Bowen, markets editor at Axios. I am here with the Lieutenant Governor of California, Eleni Kounalakis. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Dion.
Lieutenant Governor, I want to start here. The governor's task force on business and jobs recovery issued a statement in June calling for equitable solutions for California and the nation. Since that statement, I want to ask you, what actions have you taken through the governor's office to follow up on that and to make sure that it gets done and gets done in an equitable way on the state level?
Well, thank you very much. Here in California, we are very focused on the issue of equity and have been for quite some time. So when the task force was created, it was put at the top of the agenda, not just to look at what we needed to do as a state to recover from COVID, but how we could do it in a way that would target communities that are very often left behind. So in particular, we wanted to make sure that communities of color, which are suffering disproportionately from COVID itself, have the PPE in those workplaces, in essential workplaces that would protect them. And then as the task force came together around economic recovery, and by the way, this is a group of people, very high-level volunteers, including the CEOs of Apple and Lockheed Martin, Chipotle, and so many other really high-level volunteers who are putting their time in. This issue comes up time and again. So on the budget, which is probably the most important thing for us because we have had to make some very serious cuts from the January budget to today to fill a $54 billion hole. We've been very focused on making sure that the programs that get preserved are the ones that help underserved communities the most. And then in terms of economic recovery, we've got these incredible programs to get in there and help small and medium-sized businesses recover because, again, many of California's people of color work in those small businesses.
Okay. And what are those specifically? Can you just lay out a couple for me?
Sure. Actually, today is a really big day for the task force. We are announcing one of the biggest programs that we've done so far. It's called Calling All Californians, and people can access the program through biz.ca.gov. But what we've noticed is that a lot of small businesses, and again, small businesses are largely people of color, run by people of color, or people of color work in those. It can be very daunting to have this transition from your small business that people walk in with the storefront and an online presence. And so what this program does is matches up small businesses with big, very successful California companies or companies located here. We're talking about Google, Salesforce, GoDaddy, Square. And these companies come together and said, look, we'll help small businesses figure this out. It can be very intimidating to have an online presence, to build a website, to find customers online. It's going to be really expensive. And so these said, we're going to offer services for free to help companies stand up their online presence and get going. So there's opportunity for will consult to build that website. GoDaddy is offering free website services for a period of time to get you going. Google Ad Services, their people will volunteer for free to help you figure out how do you advertise and reach those customers. One of my favorites is Nextdoor, which is working on a program to connect people to their neighborhood businesses and help them keep going.
It's a pretty deep,
really robust.
In online, in the Silicon Valley and online in general. Speaking of small businesses, though, I also want to talk a little bit about the payroll protection program. And I'm wondering, what are small business owners telling you about that program specifically and its effectiveness?
So we heard at the beginning that there were many small businesses that didn't have access to the program. And just for the folks watching, that's a federal program, came out of the CARES Act. And what it does is it allows businesses to get grant money or loan money if they don't lay off their employees. It's a really big deal. In California, we've had about 5.2 million people go on unemployment who weren't there before. But many companies using this program can hold on to their employees. But what we saw is that if you're a small business and you bank with a small local bank instead of one of the big banks that went to their customers, said, hey, you got to participate in this, and were able to get access to those funds quickly, a lot of small businesses really had trouble accessing them. And so we were very pleased to see the federal government extend this to August. There are still funds available, significant funds available through that program. So small businesses across California are encouraged to look at it, see if that program is right for them, and participate in it if they think it can help them through what we all know is going to be a difficult additional few months.
Right. And are there any California-specific efforts to help small business owners, and particularly small business owners of color? Because we've seen through data and analysis that people of color, business owners of color in particular, were left out or largely shut out of that federal program.
So we have within state government, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. They have been working, they have open lines, they give consulting services and support. But what I think we're really talking about here is outreach. Because many small businesses, particularly if they're in communities of color, they don't know we're here. They don't know how to find us. And so a big part of what we're trying to do in California is really get the word out. So I'll be doing a lot of media interviews about this. The governor is likely going to be talking about it today in his press conference. This is a really big deal because if you're a small business and you're not online, you don't have an online presence, but you know that you can hold on to your customers and keep your company going. This is a great opportunity for you. You can ask the questions, you can get the support, you can launch an online presence, and you can do it with the best companies in the world who are offering these services right now for free.
Absolutely. And I do want to say, since we're talking about the PPP, your name has been in some headlines. Your husband's company or a company affiliated with your husband was mentioned as taking a loan. Did you want to comment on that?
Well, I'm no longer affiliated with the family business. Obviously, I've been in this job for quite some time. And before this, I was working overseas as a United States ambassador. So other people make those decisions. But I will say this about that program. It has just been extended. What has not yet been extended is the federal government supporting people who are on unemployment with an additional $600 a week. Dion, I don't know how many people you've come in contact with who are taking advantage of this program. There are over 5 million people in California. These are not people who are necessarily going to be able to go get PPP loans, right? These are people who are just trying to survive. That federal program of supplementing unemployment insurance is, to me, the most important federal program that we have. And so I am urging the federal government to extend that program because it is truly what is allowing for California families to be able to stay with their head above water during the COVID crisis.
Okay. Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dion. It's great to be with you.
Well, apologies for those technical difficulties earlier. I'd like to bring back in Lila Owens, founder of Cupcake and Bake Shop, to finish our conversation. Lila?
Hi, Alexi. I'm back.
Hi, Lila. Welcome back. Sorry about that. So before we got cut off, you were really giving us some insights into how digital tools have helped your small business in this time of need because of the pandemic. You were talking about meeting customers where they are, relying on ad services and different things like that. Can you just talk to us a little bit more about how you're using Instagram and Facebook in this time and how you're thinking differently as a small business owner about the power of digital tools?
Sure. So I think being at home, naturally, a lot of us are on social media a little bit more than we would be. And we are using Instagram and Facebook to stay in front of the customer. It is a tool that we're using for our delivery service, which is same and next day. So basically, we'd post the cities and the flavors that we're going to have for the next day and make it more convenient for people. And as opposed to calling or sending an online order, they're able just to send us a direct message through Instagram to place their order. That has been working very well for us. The customers like it. It's offset some of the revenue we lost with walk-in traffic. We are still running ads on Instagram and Facebook for life celebratory events like birthdays, anniversaries, things that are still occurring, pandemic or not. So we've gotten a great
Lila,
response.
Let me ask you this, Lila. I'm imagining, based on what I'm hearing in terms of how successful the digital tools have been for helping you, that even when the pandemic is over, will you still be using these digital tools and Instagram and Facebook in the same way, do you think?
That's a great question. And that's something that I pondered, like when things normalize, will we continue the, next day delivery? And it's something that we're considering. Prior to the pandemic, we used Facebook and Instagram as our main tool for marketing. And so we just kind of ramped it up during this time. I think we'll continue to use it. And we may continue the delivery service.
Well, Lila Owens from Cupcake and Bake Shop, thank you so much for spending some time with Axios today. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And now I'd like to bring back in my colleague, Dion, for our final Why It Matters segment. Dion, you there?
Hey, I'm here, Alexi. How you doing?
Hey, Dion. Good. So what I'm fascinated by, I think you and I, being millennials, we think about digital tools and social media as second nature, but it's really fascinating to hear how it's becoming a new normal for small businesses like Lila's to really survive, and it sounds like thrive in this moment.
Yeah, and it's almost become a necessity, as she said. And the Lieutenant Governor also talked about how their program is working to get folks from Salesforce, Google, and some of these specifically online Silicon Valley companies working with small businesses to get them online. And that's really, it's something I've been writing about in the Axios Markets newsletter, which is this new normal for small businesses and really all businesses. If you weren't online in the past, you're going to have to get online. You're going to have to get online fast. More people are shopping online for groceries, food, all these sorts of things that they would have done in store. And even older people now are getting online more than they ever have. So that's certainly one change.
Yeah.
But for businesses that can't do business online and can't do sales, they've got a lot of questions ahead of them or can't do it as effectively.
Yeah, well, and one, of course, everyone should sign up for your newsletter, the Markets newsletter at Axios. But also, Dion, something I was thinking through, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, is as things are moving online and relying more heavily on digital tools, do we think that that makes the barrier to entry to participate in this marketplace easier, harder, the same, especially for minority-owned businesses?
Yeah, online is a crowded space. And really, when you open a store, you open up a store, you can offer discounts, you can flyer the neighborhood. There are certain strategies you can do to get people in the door. Online is a very different place because you're competing against everyone. So it does disadvantage small businesses who don't have the kind of reach that, a Google, a Facebook, a Yelp might have. And they can try to leverage some of those platforms, but they're also going to be competing against these multinational businesses in a lot of cases. And we really could see a squeezing out of not just the middle, which has been happening for a better part of a decade, maybe two, but squeezing out of a lot of small businesses if there's not some tools or some pivot made, I think, by state governments, local governments, and the federal government to give these small businesses an advantage. And that's particularly true of Black-owned and minority-owned small businesses because they've been at a severe disadvantage already. Coronavirus hit, and I think we saw 41% of all Black-owned small businesses have shut their doors between February and April. So there's a lot to be done here, and it's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Well, Dion, we got to leave it there, unfortunately, for time's sake, but thank you for your smarts. And thank you all for joining this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made us all smarter, faster. If you like this conversation and you'd like to sign up for more Axios content, please sign up for any of our newsletters, including Dion's at signup.axios.com. Of course, thank you again to our partner Facebook for all of their help for joining in. And don't forget, we have new podcasts out at Axios, so you can subscribe to those wherever you get your podcast, Axios Recap and Axios Today, 2 separate podcasts. Great listening for you. Thank you all again for tuning in from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Axios.com. We'll see you next time.